My name is Simone. And the night my stepmother told me she wished I'd never been born, I didn't cry. I didn't argue, I just nodded once, walked to my room, and started making a list. Not of grievances, not of grievances, not of memories, a list of every dollar I'd ever spent on that house. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got there. My father remarried when I was 11. Her name was Claudine. She came with pressed linen blouses, a daughter 2 years younger than me, and the kind of smile that looked warm in photos but felt like a warning in person. My stepsister's name was Marin. She had my father's attention from the first Sunday dinner, which was impressive considering she wasn't his. I told myself it was an adjustment period. Everyone said so. Give it time. Give her a chance. Give her a chance. Give her a chance. Give curve. Give curve. I gave for 19 years. By the time I was 30, I was working remotely as a medical billing specialist, which sounds dull until you realize it meant I could work from anywhere, including the house I'd somehow never fully left. My father had been sick on and off since my late 20s. Nothing catastrophic, just the slow accumulation of a body that had worked too hard for too long. He needed rides to appointments, someone to navigate insurance calls, someone who understood the difference between a denial and an appeal. That someone was always me. Claudine managed the household in the way certain women manage things, by directing others to do them. She kept a calendar on the refrigerator with tasks color-coded by person. Mine were always in red. Marin's, when she deigned to visit, were in pencil, light enough to erase. I'm not sure exactly when I started paying the utilities. It happened gradually, the way most burdens do. First, it was just covering the electric bill 1 month when my father's pension came in late. Then the internet, because I needed it for work and the service had been cut. Then the water, because I was the one who answered the shut-off notice taped to the door. Then groceries, because the fridge was empty 3 nights in a row and no one else seemed to notice. I kept receipts out of habit. I'm a medical billing specialist. Documentation is how I think. The house itself was owned outright. My father had paid it off years before he met Claudine. His name on the deed. Clear, simple, mine to understand. That mattered later. It mattered a lot. The night everything cracked open started with a pot roast. Claudine had made it for Marin, who was visiting for the weekend with her boyfriend, a man named Troy who laughed too loudly and talked only about himself. The table was set for 4. My chair was not at the table. It was pushed slightly to the side, angled toward the kitchen the way you'd position a chair for someone helping to serve. I pulled it to the table myself, quietly, without comment. Marin's boyfriend was mid-story about a golf trip when Claudine looked at me and said, with that particular brand of offhand cruelty that requires practice, I was just telling Marin, this house would breathe so much easier with fewer people in it. Troy laughed, not sure why, just filling sound. My father didn't look up from his plate. Marin reached for more bread. I set my fork down. I pay the internet, the electric, the water, and the gas, I said, keeping my voice level. I also covered the property tax in March when you told me you were short. Claudine's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind her eyes did. We never asked you to do any of that. There it was. The sentence I'd heard before in different shapes. You volunteered. You inserted yourself. No one asked you to care. You're right, I said. You didn't ask. You just let me. She set down her wine glass very carefully. Simone. You've always had a way of making yourself the center of things. I pay to be here, I said. I've been paying to be here for 6 years. No one told you to. Her voice had gone smooth and quiet, the register she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. And honestly, I've been thinking for a while that it might be better for everyone if you found your own place. You'd be happier. We'd all have more room. Troy was very interested in his plate. Marin was examining her nails. My father, my actual father, cleared his throat and said, Let's not do this at dinner. That's not fair. Not she contributes. Just not at dinner. I looked at him for a long moment. He didn't look back. I excused myself, walked to my room, and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands in my lap. The ceiling fan clicked on every rotation, a tiny mechanical hiccup I'd long since stopped hearing. I heard it now. I heard everything, very clearly. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a new document. I titled it, What I'm Owed. I wasn't angry, or rather I was, but it was the cold, clarifying kind of anger. The kind that doesn't make you want to yell but makes you want to organize. I started in January 2 years back because that's how far my bank records went without having to dig. Electric, average $180 a month. Internet, $89. Water, $54. Gas, variable, but I had the statements. Groceries, I was conservative. I estimated low, didn't count the months I'd done full shops. Property tax, $3,400 in March. One payment, one receipt. My father's co-pays, 12 of them over 18 months, $35 each. Prescriptions, 4 times, amounts I remembered clearly because I'd had to move money around to cover them. I didn't count my time. I didn't know how to put a number on driving someone to a cardiology appointment at 7 a.m. and sitting in a waiting room for 3 hours with a cup of terrible coffee and a book I couldn't focus on. Some things don't have a line item. By midnight, I had a number. It was larger than I expected and exactly what I should have expected. I saved the document. Then I opened a second one and started drafting an email to a lawyer. Nothing dramatic. Just, I have some questions about property and tenancy rights in our state. When could you speak? I sent it and went to sleep. I slept fine. The next morning, Marn was in the kitchen making smoothies like she lived there, which she didn't. She had a condo 40 minutes away, paid for largely by the inheritance my grandmother had left to both of us. Mine had gone towards 6 years of living expenses that weren't mine to cover. Hers had gone toward the condo, furniture, and a trip to Portugal she posted about for 3 weeks. Morning, she said, without turning around. I poured coffee. Didn't answer. You upset her, you know? Still not turning around. She cried last night. She told me I should leave my father's house, I said. She said the house would breathe easier. Marin finally turned. She had Claudine's way of looking slightly past you, like you were a piece of furniture she was deciding whether to rearrange. She's going through a lot. So am I. It's not the same. It never is, I said, and took my coffee to my room. I heard from the lawyer 2 days later. We spoke for 40 minutes. He was measured, careful, said what I already suspected. Since the house was my father's, Claudine had no legal standing to ask me to leave. She wasn't on the deed. My father would have to formally ask in writing, with proper notice, following state tenancy law. Because regardless of our relationship, I was effectively a tenant of record given the length of my stay and my documented financial contributions. He said, your contributions actually complicate our position significantly. Keep every receipt. I already had them. That weekend I drove my father to a follow-up appointment. We didn't talk much in the car. We rarely did anymore. The silences between us having grown thick with all the things neither of us said. He looked out the window. I watched the road. In the waiting room, he fell asleep in his chair. He did that sometimes. The medication made him drowsy. I sat beside him and watched him breathe and tried to remember the last time he'd said something kind to me and found I couldn't. Specifically, he'd been kind in general once, vaguely, diffusely, but nothing I could point to, nothing I could hold. When we got home, Claudine met us at the door. She took his arm, guided him inside, asked how he was feeling. She did this smoothly, practiced. She was good at the performance of care. It just never extended past the edge of what other people could see. I carried in the pharmacy bag, left it on the kitchen counter. She didn't acknowledge it. The next 3 weeks were quiet in the surface way that usually means something is building underneath. I went about my work, my routine. I stopped volunteering for things, stopped asking if anyone needed groceries, stopped answering the question of who was handling the gas bill. I paid what I always paid. I just stopped announcing it. And I watched. Claudine noticed the shift before my father did. She started leaving notes. Actual paper notes on the kitchen counter, not directed at me specifically, just someone needs to call the insurance about the claim, and the yard service hasn't been paid. I took photos of the notes and filed them. I didn't respond to them. One evening, I was in my room with the door open, working, when I heard her on the phone. Her voice carried the way it always did when she wanted it to, and I'd learned over years that she had 2 registers, the one for when she thought she was alone and the one for performance. This was the first one. She just sits in that room, she said. Barely contributes. I've really tried, but some people just take and never. A pause. I know. But it's our house and I just don't know how much longer I can. I closed my laptop, sat with what I'd just heard. She was describing me to someone, a friend, a sister, I didn't know, as someone who didn't contribute. In the house I paid utilities for, to the life of the man I drove to every appointment. I opened my laptop again. I opened the Notes app. I started a new list. Not of money this time, of time. I thought about something my college roommate had said once. Years ago, when I told her about my family situation, she'd been quiet for a moment and then said, "Simone, the people who take the most from you are always the ones who act most like you owe them." I'd written it in a journal I still had somewhere. Now I thought about it again. The way old truths have a way of surfacing exactly when you need them. I found my father in the living room the next afternoon between his shows. I sat across from him. He looked at me with the mild, vaguely apologetic expression he'd worn for most of my adult life. A man who knew things weren't right and had decided that awareness was the same as action. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Okay, did you know I've been paying the utilities? The electric, water, internet, gas, the property taxes in March." He was quiet. Then, "I knew you helped out." "It hasn't been help. It hasn't been help. It's been every month for 6 years." He looked toward the window. "She said you offered." "I didn't offer. I noticed the shut-off notice on the door and I paid it. And then I kept paying it because no one else did." He was quiet for a long moment. The kind of quiet that told me he'd known more than he'd admitted, to me or to himself. "She mentioned maybe," he stopped, "that I should leave," I finished. "I know. She mentioned it to me directly." He didn't deny it. "It might be good for you," he said, "to have your own space." It wasn't what he said. It was the softness of it, the gentle gentleness of it, the way he'd wrapped a dismissal in consideration and handed it to me like a gift. "Okay," I said. "Then you should know that when I go, the utilities go with me. Everything in my name goes with me. And you'll want to have that conversation with your wife because I don't think she understands what I've actually been covering." I got up and walked back to my room. I didn't slam the door. There was nothing to prove. That night, I started the spreadsheet, not the estimate, the real one, with actual figures organized by month, cross-referenced with bank statements. I spent 4 hours on it. It wasn't cathartic, exactly. It was more like finishing a sentence I'd been speaking for years. Every number was a word. Every total was a paragraph. By the time I was done, I had a document that told the whole story without a single adjective. Numbers don't need emotion. They just need to be accurate. 2 weeks later, my stepsister's boyfriend posted a photo from a dinner at the house. Claudine's famous lamb, her good dishes, candles on the table. The caption was something about family and gratitude and how lucky they were to have each other. It had 47 comments by morning, mostly heart emojis and people saying, "What a beautiful family." I was not in the photo. I'm not sure what I expected. I'd never been in the photos. But something about seeing it that morning, coffee in hand, sunlight doing its indifferent job through the kitchen window, something about it just landed differently. I went back to my room. I pulled up the spreadsheet. I added a tab I'd been drafting for a few days. Next steps. I called the lawyer again. I asked specific questions. I listened carefully to the answers. Then I called the utility companies one by one and asked what I needed to do to remove a residence from my account with 30 days' notice. It was all very straightforward. I drafted a letter, printed it, put it in an envelope. My name on the return address, my father's name on the front. Inside was a cover letter, 1 page, calm and factual, a summary of my financial contributions, a list of the utilities I would be removing from my accounts at the end of the following month, and a copy of the spreadsheet. No accusations, no accudepsives, just numbers and dates and the word sincerely before my signature. I left it on his nightstand on a Wednesday morning while everyone was still asleep. By Thursday evening, the house had a different texture. Claudine moved through it with a careful, contained energy, the way someone walks around broken glass they haven't swept yet. She didn't mention the letter. Neither did my father. Marin called, and I know they spoke for a long time behind the closed bedroom door, but no one came to me. That was fine. On Friday, I got a text from my father. It said, "We should talk." I replied, "Anytime." We talked on Saturday morning at the kitchen table, Claudine notably absent. He looked older than he had earlier that week. Or maybe I was just seeing him more clearly. "This is a lot of money," he said, referring to the spreadsheet. "Yes, she didn't know about most of this. She didn't ask." He pressed his lips together. "What do you want, Simone?" It was a fair question. I'd thought about it. "I don't want money," I said. "I want acknowledgement. And I want a 30-day notice so I can find my own place properly without being made to feel like I'm the one doing something wrong." He nodded slowly. "And I want you to know," I said carefully, "that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm leaving because I should have left sooner. But I needed you to see what leaving actually means practically, so there were no surprises." He looked at the table. "I should have said something when she talked to you the way she did." "Yes," I said, "you should have." He didn't argue. I moved out 34 days later. I rented a one-bedroom apartment 9 minutes away. Close enough to get to my father quickly if I needed to, far enough to breathe. I took my name off every account the day after I signed my lease. The electric bill arrived at the house 2 weeks later under their names for the first time. Claudine called me. It was the first time she'd called me directly in over a year. "The amount is different," she said. I could hear her trying to keep her voice neutral and not quite managing. "Rates change," I said pleasantly. "You might want to look at what plan you're on." A pause. "You were on a specific account type." "I was," I said. "Mine." Another pause. Then, quietly, "The property taxes are due in March." "I know," I said. "They've always been due in March." I didn't say anything else. I let the silence do the work. She didn't ask for help. I didn't offer it. We said goodbye like two women who barely knew each other, which I realized after I hung up was essentially true. My apartment was small and needed some paint and had a radiator that sounded like it was working through personal issues. I loved it immediately. I bought a plant for the windowsill. I made coffee at the exact temperature I preferred without asking if anyone else wanted some. I worked with the window open and listened to the sounds of a building that had nothing to do with my history. Some people in my position would have wanted an apology, a reckoning, a scene. I found I didn't, particularly. What I wanted was what I had, a kitchen that was mine, receipts that were filed, and mornings that started without anyone else's needs pressing in before I'd finished my first cup. I still drive my father to his appointments. Not everyone. I explained that I was available, not on call, and he understood or at least accepted the distinction. Marin has taken on 2 of the monthly ones. It took her a while to figure out how the insurance portal worked, but she got there. 3 months after I moved out, my father called me on a Sunday afternoon. We talked for an hour, just the 2 of us, which hadn't happened in years. He asked about my work. He asked about the apartment. He told me a story about a man he'd worked with decades ago, someone I'd never heard of, and I realized mid-story that he was just talking, not managing anything, not navigating anything, just talking to me. At the end, he said, "You did the right thing." I wasn't sure if he meant leaving, or the letter, or all of it. I didn't ask him to clarify. I just said, "I know." And I meant it. I'm not estranged from my father. I don't have a redemption story that ends with a tearful reconciliation and everyone learning their lesson around a holiday table. Real life doesn't clean up that neatly, and I've stopped wanting it to. What I have is a version of a relationship that's honest about its limits. He loves me in the incomplete way he's always loved me. Claudine and I are cordial in the specific way of 2 people who have agreed, without saying so, to pretend a particular year never happened. Marin and I text occasionally, mostly about my father's appointments. She's better at things than I gave her credit for, when she doesn't have the option of handing them off to me. I volunteer on Tuesday evenings at a financial literacy clinic downtown. Young women, mostly, navigating first apartments and confusing lease agreements and bank accounts no one ever taught them to read. I sit beside them while they go through their statements and I don't tell them what to do. I just help them see what they already have in front of them. Last week, a girl maybe 22 spread her bank records across the table and looked at them like they were written in a language she didn't speak. "I don't even know what I'm looking for," she said. "You're looking for the pattern," I told her. "What goes out every month without you deciding to. That's what you start with." She nodded slowly, like she was filing it somewhere. I know that feeling, the beginning of seeing clearly. Before I wrap up, I want to say something to you. Whoever you are, wherever you're listening from, if you've ever paid for a place in someone's life that they never acknowledged, if you've ever kept receipts, literally or otherwise, because you knew one day you'd need to prove you were there, if you've ever had someone look at everything you contributed and say, "We never asked you to," you are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not the problem. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't a confrontation. It's documentation. It's removing your name. It's leaving so quietly that they don't realize what you took with you until the bill arrives. Leaving isn't giving up. Sometimes it's finally making a choice after years of having choices made for you. So, have you ever stayed somewhere that stopped being worth staying in? Have you ever had to put a number on what you were owed just so someone would take you seriously? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit something real for you. Tell me where you're watching from. I read everything. If you want to hear more stories like this one, stories about ordinary women making extraordinary decisions quietly, without permission, without applause, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. These stories exist because you keep asking for them. Until next time, know what you're worth. Keep the receipts. I used to think that staying was a form of love, that showing up, covering what needed covering, driving to appointments no one else would wake up early for. I thought that was how you proved you mattered to people. That if you gave enough, consistently enough, quietly enough, eventually they'd see it. Eventually it would register. It didn't, and I think now that it couldn't have because people who accept invisible labor without acknowledgement have already decided what you're worth. The giving doesn't change the number, it just keeps you busy enough not to notice. What I learned from Claudine, and I use that word deliberately, learned because she taught me something real even if she never meant to, is that some people will take everything you offer and then describe you to others as someone who contributes nothing. Not out of malice, exactly. Out of convenience. It's easier to justify pushing someone out if you've already built a version of them that deserves it. She built that version of me for years. I just didn't know how carefully until I heard her voice through the wall. The thing about being the quiet one, the capable one, the one who just handles it, is that people stop seeing the handling. It becomes ambient, expected. Background noise. My name was on the electric bill for 6 years, and my father genuinely did not fully know until I put a spreadsheet in front of him. Not because he's a cruel man, because I had made it easy not to know. That's the part I had to sit with. The part that wasn't about Claudine or Moran, or the dinner where my chair was pushed to the side. The part that was about me. I had made myself convenient. I had trained everyone around me to receive without asking, because asking felt like weakness, and weakness felt like ammunition. So I stayed silent and competent and resentful, and I called it strength. It wasn't. Strength would have been the conversation I finally had with my father. Strength was the spreadsheet, the lawyer's number, the 30-day notice. Strength was leaving before I had to, instead of waiting until I was forced. The decisions we make quietly, without approval, without applause, those are the ones that actually cost something, and the ones that actually change something. Simone moving out didn't fix her family. It didn't transform her father into someone who speaks up when he should. It didn't make Claudine into a person with more honesty, or Marin into someone without blind spots. Real life doesn't grant those conversions. What it did was draw a line between what Simone owed and what she'd been giving away, between obligation and compulsion, between staying because you choose to and staying because you're afraid of what leaving reveals about how little you were ever needed to begin with. That fear is the thing worth naming. Because underneath the receipts and the spreadsheet and the letter left on the nightstand, underneath all of it was a woman who had spent years proving she was worth keeping. And the hardest moment wasn't drafting the letter. It was accepting that she couldn't prove it to people who had already decided otherwise, and that the proof was never the point anyway. You already know what you're worth. The question is whether you're willing to stop discounting it for people who never planned to pay full price.